Welcome to the Alchemy of Ascension Season 3, harmonizing light and shadow to embody your mystical power and purpose. I'm your host, Washela Sananda, and today it's my great pleasure to introduce you to a returning guest, Suzanne Gerber. Hi, Suzanne.
Hi, what's Shayla?
I had Suzanne on my second summit, season 2, and we had a wonderful conversation. So I'm looking forward to digging in even deeper this time. And so let me start by just sharing a little from your bio so I can remind everybody who you are and what you're up to. Suzanne Gerber is a classically trained intuitive astrologer, energy healer, and spiritual life coach with 35 years experience. She is a master interpreter of the divine code of your birth chart, excuse me, and uses it to guide you to healthy, loving relationships, rewarding work, and fulfilling your soul's mission. With energy work and inspirational coaching, she clears blocks and supports clients in moving forward. And before I go forward, I'm just going to say your website is starsandstoneshealing.com. Of course, no spaces there, starsandstoneshealing.com. So welcome, Suzanne. I'm so happy to have you back.
Thank you, Shayla. It's really a pleasure to be back. And I'm really excited to be on your summit, not just because I get to talk to you for an hour, but it's because the theme of your show just absolutely perfectly dovetails with the way I like to work with my students and my clients in our readings and our astro coaching sessions. Because the way I do astrology isn't fortune telling at all. I love in your show's theme, the tagline of the concept of harmonizing light and shadow, not eradicating shadow as if we could, because when we do learn how to harmonize them and work with them and in unity, we really can embody our mystical power and purpose, like you say. But before I get into it, just like a tiny little introduction for people who might be wondering about some of the terminology, the way I am going to talk about what I mean when I talk about shadow is in kind of the Jungian sense, where it's referring to the repressed, the hidden, or the denied parts of the personality or psyche, which can block us from transcending. Um, and even though it's hidden, we all have one. And it's actually when we ignore it or we deny it or we pretend that it isn't there, which makes sense because it's not really generally a part of ourselves that we're proud of. Or even when we recognize it, but we can't quite access it, that's what feeds it and strengthens it. And it's going to reinforce it. So it's really important to be very brave and vulnerable and go poking around in those dark corners with a bright light until we find it and get to work with it. And as we do that work, it's called shadow integration in psychology, or in shamanism, we call it soul retrieval work. And there's always layers. So this is really a lifelong process. It's not like, one and done. Um, and sometimes I think we feel like we're, quote, getting away with something when we ignore it or hide it. But that really comes at a tremendous cost, because until we do that work, we leak energy and we leak power all over the place. We're not in our wholeness and we're not in our authenticity. It's like an energy leak in the house where you don't even realize it until you get these exorbitant bills. You just might not have good insulation or a tight house. And it can be very subtle, but we're not operating at our full power until we do this work. And when it's really out of control, like with people who haven't worked through trauma, say, it can actually undermine and sabotage us. And this is why it's so vital to find it and to heal it. And one of the great perks of that, not just our own wholeness, but it helps us become more understanding and accepting and compassionate with other people. Um, and so that's the way I want to go into it. And then we'll see why astrology is such a unique way to identify it and figure out ways to work with it.
Ooh, I love the way you described that as denying the shadow parts, actually feed it. And also the analogy of like a leaky house or a leaky faucet that you're not aware of. You're leaking energy when we have these parts that are there and we don't want to look at them. We want to push them away and they're actually, like sucking the energy from us. And that's exactly it. That is why I chose this topic for this summit, because let's face it, the world has a lot of chaos going on right now. And we've got to be powerful and diligent in excavating our own shadow sides so that we can deal with being in the world. So thank you for that clarification. That was really helpful. And I just love the way you put that. So just to get a little foundation on you a little more, how did you come to have the knowledge that you have, particularly around astrology and your unique way of interpreting it?
Yeah, it's a great question. There's a few different ways, I would say. And the first is I sought it out very actively. I wasn't happy with the limited world that I was experiencing, and I knew there was a lot more. And so I always sought, whatever you want to say, answers, going beyond what seemed to present itself. And astrology was just a very strong affinity for me my whole life. I think a lot of people, whatever the work they do, they would say it always called to them. It's in our soul. It could come from a past life. It's hard to know the roots of it. But astrology was always a very powerful thing. I used to, from my earliest memories, in my earliest dreams, which I still remember, involved the night sky. And as a teenager, I would dabble in, kind of pop psychology, sun signs and things like that. But I could never get away with it from it. And then when I moved to New York in the 80s, the first thing I did was seek out a teacher. And the way these things always happen, she found me.
Mm.
you know, you think you're doing it and you really just kind of show up. And then the universe just kind of says, oh, we've been waiting for you, and pulls you along. And then things just befell me, also the way these things do when we line up, when we're in residence with our higher self, our higher intention. Things flow. We don't have to work that hard. And I'm sure most of the people watching us have had these same experiences. They're coincidences, right? I thought I was going on a nice relaxing vacation before I went off to get married. No, the place I was going to was an 8-day silent Vipassana meditation retreat. And I was pregnant and I didn't know it. And just like big teachings, and like Jack Cornfield, but also just what came up inside of me, not being able to talk and write and read for 8 days and just be alone with me. And then from there, this teacher, that teacher, this experience. And I can't even tell you that I had a path or a through line for it. You show up and the universe is going to set this stuff up for you. And then I would have to say that the next thing where I really came to acquire, that's quote unquote, this knowledge, quote unquote, is working with people. Just I come in thinking I know some stuff and I learn how much I don't know. And people share, they share their life and their experiences. And you get to be like in an astrology laboratory all the time. What could this mean? Because nothing only means one thing. There's just this host of possibilities, and you start to learn all the different flavors and the nuances, and you learn to like quiet your thinking brain and your analyzing brain, and you just allow things to present. And then my training, I did 2 different shamanic training programs, and that really teaches us just to be present and just to be in awe of everything around you. And when we can stay in awe, there's so much wisdom there. So did I learn it? Did I acquire it? It's hard to say. Whenever I think I know something, I realize it's really just the tip of the iceberg. So
Mm.
always learning.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that and just kind of unpacking, your journey. It sounds like you've been having mystical experiences your whole life, or those mystical synchronicities, if you want to call it that. And It feels like the more we step into our purpose work, the more those synchronicities align and you're led to the right teacher, or the teacher finds you, or, however that shows up. It's an evolution of the synchronicities of being on purpose. So, the next question I have for you, I'm asking this to everybody in conjunction with the theme of the show. How do you balance the light and shadow in your life?
Oh, it's a wild tango. It's just, I'm a Libra. I'm a really strong Libra. So balancing things is my MO. It's like the way I seek to do everything. And how do we come into balance? Is it usually some little teeny tiny micro adjustment? No way. It's like these big crazy things come at you and you have to find a way. I mean, if you want to, I certainly want to. I was going to share this a little later, but since you asked me, I'm in the middle, and I'll talk about this as we get a little deeper into the astrology of it. But I was having the worst day ever yesterday, and I'm just so upbeat. People who know me just are like, "What? This is not you." And I just kept getting pulled deeper and deeper, and I just couldn't get out of it. Everything that was happening to me, I was taking personally. It was exacerbating my anger and my feeling of what's wrong with me and why is this happening to me? And I'm like, after seriously 8 hours of just like one thing going wrong after another, I said, wait, what's happening in my chart again? Because astrologers, we have a funny habit of forgetting to look at our own transits, right? And nothing really happening in my birth chart. And then I went over to another chart that we work with, and we especially work with it when people are consciously evolving their lives. It's called the Progress chart. And we basically just take your birth chart and move it up one day for every year that you've been on this planet. And then we readjust the ascendant to where you are now. And that's a little debatable, but that's the way I work with it. You move the ascendant. And I knew that I have my progressed moon, my inner life, my feelings, my emotions, um, is in the sign of Capricorn, which is very unemotional. It's very aloof. Capricorn's about structure, it's about work, it's about getting work done. It happens to be in my house of relationships. So there's some lessons in this 2.5 year cycle in my life. And what's happening this week? The planet Pluto that I'm going to be talking about, the ruler of the underworld and of Scorpio and the most mysterious realms of our whole chart, is exactly on it. This is a once in a lifetime thing. And what Pluto does is it digs things up from the depths, and it makes us, well, it invites us, we never have to do anything, do we? It invites us to look at things on a much deeper level. And when I did that, I was like, wow, and just speaking the language of astrology, I said, I'm being invited to transform my perception of how things happen to me in my interactions with people. And I remember that great cliche when, somebody does something in a work setting that you don't like, they go, hey, this is business, not marriage, right? Just like take it on the chin. And I brought this back to the things I was working with and getting frustrated in. And I said, wow, I am being invited to do this. And I'm going to be talking about this. And I'm still learning about this. Mm-hmm. So the way I do it is I think I know stuff. The universe throws me a curveball. I get really pissed off and I react reflexively. I try to go deeper. I try to take it up to the more mythic, soulful level, and then try to pull myself up to it and stay there.
Yeah. Very well shared. Thank you. I like that concept of being invited to work through something, or when the shadow stuff comes up. It's an invitation to do some inner work, isn't it?
Some people might call it a euphemism.
Yeah. Thank you. So So operating that way, and I love that you take it up, you let yourself, meet that when you can recognize it, when we could step out of our reaction, and be responsive, like, okay, it's an invitation to move something up. And so when you do that, does that help you embody your mystical power and purpose?
It changes everything. Well, Shayla, you're just not even who you had been 5 minutes before. We all have different levels of frequency that we go in and out of, just like we have different brainwave states that we go in and out of all day long, and not just waking, sleeping. When we drift a little, when we daydream, when we get hyper focused, we're always, kind of oscillating. And I think when we can remember what's really going on, that it's not our egoic self, it's a soul lesson, it's an opportunity to up level. When we can catch, it's like waking up in a dream is what I always liken it to. Dreams can be really scary, the monsters coming, the this, the that. And if you train, if you practice waking up in your dreams, and you can direct them, and you can actually make shifts in your, not just in the dream time, but in your real life, I feel like we always have the opportunity. Every moment contains in it the opportunity to transcend, even to, really, as the Buddhists say, enlightenment is in the palm of your hand. We just forget. It's just, there's always the moment. And I find that these challenges, when shadow comes in hard, they're the best moments to do it, because it's just the bigger the challenge, I think, I know you agree with this, the bigger the challenge, the bigger the problem, the greater the opportunity. They really are in absolute perfect proportion. So the goal isn't to never, react. I mean, I guess it is to some traditions, it's total non-attachment, but we're humans, and we're just really practicing this. So to me, I feel like a big win is when we just start speeding up the reaction time, right? Less lag time. We start going, oh, I know what this is. Here's my invitation. And yeah, when you do that, it's it's your mystical power. It's your magical ways. It's your connection to everything that is. It's infinite what can happen, but it's hard to stay there. And so the work is just keeping ourselves, just more moments up there, fewer down here.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Yes, exactly. And I would say you're speeding up your response time. Is that's powerful. When we can actually catch ourselves and then have catch ourselves reacting to something, and then allow ourselves to respond in an upgraded way. That's where the magic is.
And remembering at any second, and this is where the free will comes in, at any second we can stop the momentum of that speeding train and just say, I don't want to keep going in that direction. And we can just stop.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And that takes willingness and maturity, emotional maturity to do that. And it's something we can practice and hone and work with, and then not judge ourselves when we don't stop the train.
Right,
Uh,
exactly.
yeah, yeah. So I want to move into our conversation about astrology, since that is what your specialty is. Let's start with this, in conjunction with the theme of the show as well. Are there positive or negative signs or configurations in astrology?
Well, that's a good question, and that's a really often debated one. I think it depends on the philosophical view of the astrologer. Um, I don't. I think that a lot of people are moving away from the concept of good and bad, because that's just human egoic judgment.
Mhm.
Um, when we're working with something on a spiritual level, even psychologically oriented, we don't say good or bad. People always ask me that. Is that bad? And I just
Mhm.
laugh. I go, it just is. But we do acknowledge that some things are easier and lighter, with light and shadow, right? It's easier light, or it could be dark or heavy or even dense energy. It's like the yin yang, right?
Yep.
You don't say one side's good and one side's bad. they're just opposites that complete the whole and contain the seed of the other. So there's always the polarity. So even if you were, and I don't, consider something bad, you would say in it is the seed of its opposite. And when we move through that polarity, from shame to acceptance, from victim to empowerment, uh, we that's another way, a way to up level it. I think just a little bit more on that, because it's such a great question. To say something's good or bad is, I think of that as kind of very old school and kind of doom and gloom astrology, where people, when you look at the old books and you listen to some of the old teachings, it's, it almost has a little bit of like that old Judeo-Christian guilt built into it, which I think we've really moved away from in more modern, spiritually based astrology. And we just see it as what is. And it's how we work with that. Every sign, every planet, even the relationship between planets, have a light and a shadow, have opportunities. They can show where the challenges are, they can show where the gifts are, and they can show how we can aspire through the very essence that's contained in that planet or sign. Really, even when you have something that is dark or challenging, again, I go back to, it's an invitation, it's an opportunity to catch a blind spot. We all come in with old patterning, and a lot of things get reinforced in our childhoods that beat us down and hold us back. And when we use, and they're indicated in the chart, but when we can see them, we can say, this doesn't serve me anymore. I choose to acknowledge it and to honor the gifts of it, the teaching of it, which isn't always so easy to get to, let's be honest, especially if it's a very traumatic experience in our vulnerable childhood. But it is. These are just, again, the harder the challenge, the bigger the opportunity for growth and bringing more beauty into the world and helping others. So I was going to give the example of Aries, which just really pops into my head. Aries, the first sign, the gift of Aries is it's very courageous and it's motivated, it's passion and it's power, it's assertive and straightforward, and it's fearless. And then its shadow side is it can be selfish and opportunistic and competitive and even, thoughtless and violent sometimes. So even in something that is a challenge, there's the opportunity to flip it upside down and to move into the aspirational aspects of it. Mm-hmm. And if I can just say a little bit more, just kind of traditional astrology, there are certain planets that we do associate with the shadow. Pluto, which I mentioned earlier, that was my big teacher yesterday. Pluto, as I said, it rules the underworld in Scorpio, and it tends to show us, if we're willing to look at it, some of these darker hidden things about ourselves. And it's associated with the 8th house. So the 8th house is a place where action that's happening there can have shadowy undertones or very, very strong overtones. The planet Neptune, especially in certain styles of astrology, is considered a real trickster, really very shadowy, because it's confusing and it can lead you to believe one thing when it's really not the truth at all. It can make us act very, quote unquote, irrationally. And Mars, the ruler of Aries, also can be selfish and warlike and, and blunt and hurtful, even if it doesn't mean to. But it's not that simple, because even the planets that we consider benefic, which is as close as we come to saying good, generous and easy, maybe let's say, they can even have their darker shadow qualities because they can be too much of a good thing, right? Like Jupiter can be too abundant and too extravagant, and it can be wasteful and move too fast and do some harm, like collateral damage along the way. And Venus can be obsessed. It can be so obsessed with beauty and possessions and comfort that it doesn't step into its challenges.
Mm.
And there's so many more things too that we do look for shadow. That gets a little esoteric, and I don't want to, be doing inside baseball here if people don't understand it. But there are points in the chart; they're not planets. But there's the black moon Lilith, which represents the moon's furthest extension point from where we are, and just by that definition, it's in shadow, and it represents shadow and unclaimed parts of ourselves that we need to integrate so that we can, when we're not, like we were saying before, when we haven't brought it in, we're acting out sometimes. And we can see this in, people that get diagnosed as having personality disorders, or even mental illness, and of course addictions. These to me are just all aspects of people who haven't integrated and done their shadow work. And the moon's nodes, which is a subject unto itself. It can show us things that we've brought in and we're habituated to, and we don't even realize, the ways that they're holding us back or even blocking the positive expression of our charts. So, in a rather large nutshell, those are the indications of. And again, we're going to steer away from good and bad and just say shadow and opportunities to, to look at these bigger, more whole parts of ourselves.
Yeah, I really like the way you framed that because, every up has its down. It's funny you mentioned the yin and yang symbol. As when I was looking for a background, that's what I wanted to find, and then I found it was just the black and white was just too much. But that's exactly what this is all about, how we find the harmonization of the light, the dark, the good, the bad, the positive, the negative, and look at, well, none of it's actually all good or all bad or all positive or all negative or any of that. It's all a dance, it's the cosmic dance. And how can we utilize some of those more difficult, challenging aspects to actually help us evolve into higher versions of ourselves? For those of us who most all are on here, if they're watching, who are seeking to evolve into a higher frequency, into a higher version of self. So thank you for that. And I know you work very deeply with people, digging into their charts and excavating all of these things. So how do you work with shadow in your chart readings? What planets, angles, or placements indicate the shadow?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a real thrust of my work, because you don't just come at people with an agenda. I have no idea what this person really needs. I have no idea what they're really ready for. So it's a dance, it's an exploration, and we do it gently. The chart's going to show certain things. It's really hard to miss, when you've looked at thousands and thousands of charts. It's just, you just get things very quickly. And astrologers always know where the planets are in the sky right now. So as soon as we see a chart, instantly we start to see, oh, they're getting a square from this, or a conjunction and opposition from that, which challenge our status quo. And and people get really scared, except people who are truly on a path, who like, just bring it, just give me my challenges. I really want them. I'm tired of being complacent. I'm tired of being stuck, and I don't know how to get out of it. Those people welcome it and embrace it. And they don't say, so wait, 10 months of I've got to like hide out in my, bunker. It's like, no, no, no. The opposite. It's 10 months where you really get to look at this stuff and work with it. And things are likely to come up, just experiences, because what do the planets show us? They show us how our internal life, our thoughts and our beliefs, the things we hold very deeply, not our conscious stuff, which is just the tip of the iceberg, but the deep, real stuff that is driving our behavior. It's a chance to let it come out so that we can work with it. Because, like we were saying before, if we keep it trapped back there in the back of the closet, it's just going to get bigger and more disruptive, and it's going to come out in ways that we don't identify. So what as we astrologers do is, both from configurations in the birth chart, and then the movement of the planets in their chart, we get a pretty strong sense, especially if we've been working with the same people and we know who they are. We know how they react to things. And um, the way I will work with it is it has a lot to do with them, right? So I'm just there to respond to them. People who are drawn to me, it's just, and I'm sure you feel the same way, people gravitate toward the right people to work with. So people don't come to me because they want to know, very mundane things. Am I going to get that job, do this thing? I mean, that always comes up because that's real life, and it's wonderful. It's how we live our lives. But so many people really want to understand it on a deeper level. And if we don't understand it on a deeper level, we're going to keep manifesting. It's not really even experiencing. It's the world is us pushed outward, right? So while all this is still happening in there and it isn't resolved or integrated, we're going to keep manifesting experiences that are going to reflect this belief system that we have. So when we have these challenging, or whatever you want to call them, opportunities, it's perfect. I say to people, you're going through this thing that sounds really painful to them, right? And they get this face, and I go, no, it's so exciting. You really have a chance to clear that lifelong pattern for good, really, if you're willing to do that work. And um, I think it's wonderful because when we're comfortable, we get complacent. And when we're complacent, we don't grow. So yes, I wait for them, I kind of respond to them, but I also reframe it for them to see it as something to really get excited about, not in a Pollyanna head in the sand ostrichy way, but really to just look at it from a more soul-based perspective, so that they can see the heroic act of what they're doing, and not just, oh, I'm going to have to, you know however it plays out on the human level, that might not be their first choice, let's say. So it's about reframing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know. I used to do psychic readings, and sometimes you bump into really sensitive stuff that, maybe they don't want to hear about or didn't intend to have come up. And I know that happens with you in your readings as well. So it's kind of like navigating some touchy territory sometimes. Um, yeah, how do you deal with that when, I mean, some people well enough to kind of probably go into anything, but are there times where you just back off and like, okay, I'm gonna just like let that sit, or do you find like a way to present these things that is more assimilable, or do you just throw it out there and like, here you go, figure it out?
So the kind of easy answer is it's different for everybody.
Sure.
People who speak a little astrology might find this kind of funny. I'm a Libra stellium, 4 planets in Libra. So I'm really about like diplomacy, not rocking the boat, not offending people, just really trying to help people learn in a way that they can accept. But I've also got Pluto conjunct my North Node, Pluto the transformer, the deep diving, connected to my soul's purpose, and it's in the house of healing, and it's my healing. I had to go that deep. And also my rising sign is Taurus, so I can be very tenacious. So do I just let it go? No, not really. But I'll find a Libran approach. I'll find different ways to come at something. And one of the things I think a lot of great teachers and readers and healers will do is, before we even go off on this journey together, an exploration or a healing session or whatever, coaching session, we always start with the things we agree on. What are our shared truths? What are our shared values? Because we can always come back to them, because this is how they know that I'm someone they can hopefully trust and believe, and that I'm not trying to, force something down them that isn't really where they want to go and where they want to be, quote, led or guided to. When we can always reconnect, like, do we believe, that our soul is on a journey? Do we believe that there's things happening on the earth plane that are happening just because it's the only way our soul can have that experience? And that if we get too caught up in the human drama of it, we lose the gift for the soul. And we just for instance. And that's a big part of it, because if we don't share that belief system, then I'm not really sure I'm the right person for them to work with, because they're just going to want to know, no, but what's going to happen? It's like,
Right.
I don't know. You have free will, and that other person that you're interacting with, they have free will. And it's very hard to predict how people are going to use their free will. And then, P.S., in the time of COVID, when there's so many other factors at play that limit our free will in a temporary way, it's very hard to be making predictions about anything. So all I can do is remind people what I believe are their core values and their highest intentions, to live according to their life's purpose, to reconnect with their higher self, to endure things that seem painful on the earth plane in service of something just vastly more beautiful and enriching. And when we can keep coming back down to that, I don't really have to convince anybody of anything. It's, again, it's just I need to be able to see the potential, right? And what can grow out of this, um, shadowy, difficult, and, admittedly painful experience.
Yeah, that brings to mind, my father passed away a few months ago, and I was having, well, what we haven't mentioned is that Suzanne and I are actually friends outside of the Summit circuit. We live in the same or very close towns, so we get to see each other. But my father passed away, and you looked at my chart because that's what you do. And I don't even remember what it was you shared with me, but it kind of blew my mind, and like, how synchronistic is that? Like, there was something happening in my chart that was having me deal with patriarchal issues and losing, and I don't know, maybe you remember, but I was like, wow, astrology is so interesting. How, like, did that was this always going to happen right now? It kind of blows your mind when you think about how synchronized it all is when these things happen.
Oh, I think it might have been the nodes right across your fourth house and your 10th house, which is your home and your foundations, and just everything that you came in with, and you in the world, and the work, the work that you bring to other people, that you bring from your own experiences and bring it out to the world. The nodes just cross those points. I just called up your chart.
Wasn't asking for that, but I was really just demonstrating, how when at least I don't know if all astrologers do it this way, probably not, but the way that you present things, it's always a little bit like, wow, like you look at I don't know, all of these elements that I'm so novice at astrology, I don't even know what they all are, but I do know when you bring them together in this comprehensive way, it's like, well, it had to happen that way because it's just the way it was all sort of predestined to be. But yeah, it's fascinating, really fascinating when those things
And
show
one
up.
of the ways that I explain it, in which of course we can't really explain because it's so cosmic, but it's code.
It's code.
All it
Yes.
do is we learn to decode that language.
Mhm.
And the really amazing thing, the part that keeps us and should keep us ever humble, is it isn't just one way it could come out. We speak the language. This is what I teach my students. Don't try to put a lot of interpretation. Don't put your story and your values into it. Just speak the language that the stars, the planets, the movements are doing. You had the most karmic access, the north and the south that move together, going through two of the most karmic points in your own chart, your past and your future, your connection to family and dad. And you also are having that Pluto moon thing that I talked about. It's just still
Mm.
coming up for you. I'll be here for you when it happens. But this shows us both the timing, but the potential for all of the different ways that this could come out. And I'm sure other really big things happen for you, just what you had to go through, just reconnecting with your mom too.
Mhm.
It was, part of the same significance of that transit for you. And it can come out in so many different ways. Other people that would be having that it can come out in other ways. They don't necessarily have to lose a parent. They could have a
Yeah.
major career change, or things in their, they could change their relationship with a parent or someone in their family of origin. So
Hmm.
lots of lots of options, and this is the why you have to be kind of in concert with the person who's reading for you, so they can stay open to your unique experiences. And I'm not here to tell you that it's this or that, just to say, this is the energy pattern that was
Yeah.
happening in your life right now.
Yeah, so interesting. And I did have this multiple like layers of things happening all at the same time. Like, whoa, like I did have that kind of blow up experience, as so many are having right now with, the state of the world. Everything seems kind of polarized, but I personally, in my own personal life, did have multiple things, sort of like the domino effect all at once, like what's happening? And I'm grateful for all of the work that I've done, and then the help that I've had in my life to help me like navigate that, because it can be terrifying sometimes to have your life sort of blow up and try and figure out how to put the pieces back together. But to be able to see the opportunity in that is the huge gift. So
Also,
yeah, go
and
ahead.
so to work with somebody else can help you put it into a larger perspective, because when we're going through it, it's all we know. We just know that this is going crazy. Like me yesterday, what I was saying, I got such tunnel vision by the things that were happening, that I needed, excuse me, the lens of astrology helped me open it up to see it on just a very different perspective. So I didn't feel, like we were talking about, victimized, or that bad things were happening, but to remember that even out of loss is is opportunity for growth. And I'll just tell you one funny thing. I was sharing a little bit with my sister about all the things that were happening to me yesterday, and then I told her what I shared with you guys about, I realized that it was Pluto going over my moon. And she goes, "Oh, that Pluto, it's amazing how he can orchestrate all that." I said, "No, no, no. Pluto's just another thing that whatever is orchestrating is
Yeah.
also using Pluto. It's just
Hmm.
layers upon layers. It's just the planets don't cause it, just like the experiences aren't causing it, right? The phone call doesn't bring the loss. These are just messengers. And our work is always to go right to source. What's really happening? And just, when we're lucky enough to have this ability to decode and read signs and understand synchronicities and all the different ways the universe tries to communicate with us through dreams and repetitions and weird people, the weird repetition of people and
Yeah.
names and numbers.
Yes.
This is all code. And
Yeah.
astrology is just a kind of a unified codified code, where the other stuff is still code, and it's our job to look at it, and that's like our reminder to wake up in the dream.
Mm, beautiful. Yeah, it's the divine design. It's so incredible, the synchronicity of all of it. So along those same lines, and I already know the answer to this, but I'm just gonna present it so you can share a little more deeply. So I know that you can help a person balance their light and shadow when you're working with a client, but how do you do that? How, you're like, oh, you have these Pluto influences and this going on and that going on. How do you assist someone in finding that balance within it all?
There's a few different ways to do it, and again, what I'm always going to come back to, it's really unique to the individual. Some people, I have one client who really can't even do closed eye work. She's had trauma, and
Mm.
it's just too scary, so we don't try to do that. Other people are like, "Could we do some closed eye work? Can we go into trance? Can we, go into my energy field?" So it's really, first we have to work with their comfort level, right? Even as we very gently try to, help them see things and take their own little personal risks. I think it almost always starts cognitively, where we just explain in very neutral, non-judgmental, never blaming or shaming, just And that's the beauty of astrology, because we have this whole other language that we can use that removes it from us. And part of what I do personally is I use storytelling and analogy, and not long, lengthy stories, really concise, where I get the essence of what the person is going through, and myself and people in my world, and teachings, spiritual teachings that I've read, present really perfect analogies for it. So I find, especially if somebody has been traumatized, which is to say most of us on some level, we need to get it out. We need to not risk re-traumatizing them and losing them, getting them into defensiveness or dissociation. So I will often use another way to present it that I know they relate to, and then we bring it back to them. And quite often they'll actually pick it up and they'll go, that's exactly what I'm feeling. And so that gives them the opportunity to take ownership of it. And then I'll say, so I wonder what we could do about that. And again, it's with my training, it's really never me saying, here's what I think you should do about it. It's always, and it's really sincere. I wonder. And this invites them, and there's that word again, it invites them to take the lead. Because until they take the lead, it's going to be somebody else trying to do their work. And a lot of people maybe come from a background where they had authoritative parents or just very strong authority figures in their life, or unreliable authority figures in their life. And if I come at it that way, they're either not going to hear it, they're going to get into opposition, defiance with me, or they're just not going to hear it. So when we turn it around and let them say, you know what, I get this and I want to change it and I see it, then we have so many possibilities. Astrology, looking at the chart, to me, it's like looking at an MRI or any kind of scan. We look at it, that's the, call it a problem, that's the condition. And then we put that away and we come back to the actual human body, mind, energy system that's there. And we try to figure out, where are they open? When you read, when you can read and feel energy, you get a sense, you can, and I'll work with people, I'll work with their chakra systems and different other parts of their field, with their permission, with their invitation. And really what I want to do is I want to get them out of their heads. I want to get them out of the cognitive and out of the analytical diagnostic, because when we get stuck there, we just go in circles. It's a closed system and you can't break out of it. You just talk. You just describe a situation. You don't actually shift it. I feel like we need to really understand, and we do it with working with the chi and with and how it flows through the chakras. And then I've just learned other techniques, meditative techniques, even qigong techniques for clearing and dismissing, where we really just, when we're really ready to do the work, these very simple techniques can really help us clear things for good. So it's not about the technique. It's about getting the person to that point of not just readiness and willingness, but eagerness to do it. Because, and it's that great twist on that spiritual cliche, because when the student is ready, the teacher
Mhm.
will appear everywhere.
Mm.
So it's just about getting them to that point.
Mm. Yeah, beautiful. Thank you for that description. Um, yeah, and I'm just like putting all the pieces together there. I know you're very masterful with the way that you work through things, and I love hearing you share about it. So this brings up the final question. As we evolve and grow, and do our personal work, we change. Can a person's chart also change over time?
Yeah, it's such a great question. There's kind of two completely different answers, just completely different. One is, we work with other charts. That's why when I mentioned at the very beginning about, I didn't see anything happening in my natal chart. So I jumped over to my progress chart, which is so many days later. And it's a progression of my birth chart. And that represents some big differences. There'll be certain patterns that are the same, in a progress chart, but you see the evolution, and that will show where people have really taken their free will, taken their choices, taken their power, and used it. And that's why with so many people, especially after age 45 to 50, and especially people who are really on an evolved um, track or whatever path of consciousness and self-awareness and really humbling themselves to the soul's journey, I have to look at the progress chart because it just shows a very different side of them. Now, that said, our birth chart, which is really our cosmic blueprint, and it's the most important thing to always come back to, that's always going to show that essence. It's going to show, what did you come in with? What strengths, what challenges, what affinities, what potential weaknesses, where is your shadow? It'll also show very specifically, when you work with it this way, some of the let's say maybe works in progress that your soul has been doing over a course of multiple lifetimes. Because some of the really big work we do is, it's hard for most of us to accomplish in one lifetime, because we're also doing our personal growth work, and it often entails working through relationships with other souls. We're really not just doing our job alone. We really are a web, and we really need to I think, says the Libra, really work on refining and accepting, and that's why so many different types of people come into our life to challenge us, to not just be accepting of the ones that we're in affinity with. That's easy, right? To love them, to really love the ones that challenge us, challenge our beliefs, put blocks in our way of our progress and impede us. When we can really love those people, then we're really making progress. The great line that Ram Dass would say all the time to students: you think you're enlightened, go spend a week with your parents.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Right,
Right.
or your kids, if you're on that side. But the thing about, even with the birth chart, yeah, it's fixed planets. It's like a screenshot. It's like the planets are always moving, and then you're born. Screenshot. That's the picture of the sky when you were born. And with the understanding of synchronicity theory, that holds a lot of truths and code about who you are and what some of the potentials that you've come in to work on. It's just so cool. It's like, the lines of your hands. This is an analogy. Our hands are basically our hands, but the lines do evolve. They deepen, they even move. My sister reads palms, among other, esoteric gifts of hers. And she's been tracking some people's hands for 30, 40 years. And she sees the lines change as
Mm.
they do their work. And it's fascinating. And so with astrology, do we see lines change? Do we see planets move? No, it doesn't work like that. Those are your transits and your progressions. But what we do is, we as astrologers, we try to feel the person, and we feel, where are they at that whole spectrum of possibilities for that chart to be presenting at any given time. I think I've said this to you before. I read for twins and I see different things. Identical twins born a few minutes apart. I see very different shades of difference. Now imagine very different people. So we need to, and this comes back to our job. What's our responsibility? Not to judge, not to assume, not to project. I spent 350 hours in a shamanic program, and I like to say that about 50 of it was really learning practices and techniques, and having initiations, and gaining rights and things like that. The other 300 hours was figuring out where our shadow is, and where our ego is, and what's us, and where does somebody else begin, and really being able to find it, so that when we work with other people, we do not accidentally project our stuff onto them. And it's, again, like I was saying before, it's not one and done. You are always, just as we're working with other people, we're learning, and we're getting this beautiful opportunity to catch ourselves. Oh, I just said should. I just, you know what I mean? I just put my thing onto them instead of truly being there in service and just watching, listening, feeling, sensing, pulling so much together. So, really understanding how is the Jupiter playing for them. People say, I know my chart, I just want to do transits. I said, that's great that you know your chart. I don't know your chart. I don't know how Jupiter plays out for you. What is the Saturn thing for you? How is this moon? Because it isn't just one thing. You know, people say, what does that mean? And I say, there's not a book. You know, I don't pick up a book and flip to the you know, the Jupiter page and then come down to the Jupiter Saturn. You know, it doesn't work like that. This is the art of astrology. This is the interpretation. And when we can stay open enough, when we can really be that hollow bone and allow the essence of the other person to just fill up, you know, our energy together, that's when we can really start to help them. And then I say we go back to what I said before about just helping them see it and figuring out what their next steps are. But so much of it is being back. I like to think of, you know, really great astrology shamanic work with somebody is like spiritually oriented psychotherapy with a really, really good roadmap.
Wow. That's great. With a great, yeah, who wouldn't like to have a roadmap through their psychotherapy, right? How to navigate that territory. I love it. I love it. Thank you, Suzanne. I want to make sure we discuss your free gift that you're offering. Would you tell everyone about that?
Well, it's going to be a recorded talk about what I alluded to, some of the ways that we can find the shadow in our own charts. It's hard to. This is why we like one-on-one work because it's such an interplay. But I'm going to talk about Pluto, which is generational. It's a very slow moving planet. How to find Pluto in our own charts, and some of the things that we can look at with the Pluto to understand what it might be doing, but then always what we can do to turn that inside out and work with it to come to the highest promise of that, because Pluto really shows so much of our soul's journey.
Hmm. That sounds fascinating. I look forward to watching or listening to that. Okay, and you're not doing a paid offer, are you?
No, I'm
Okay,
not.
that's fine. That's fine. I just didn't want to miss it. I didn't think you were. All right. Well, we have come to the end of our time. That time flies when you're talking astrology. But I've enjoyed this conversation so much. I feel like it was really, for me, I learned a lot, and we really got to understand your depth of understanding, and what a unique practitioner you are. So we'll be sure to include details on how to get the free gift and how to get a hold of you. And I just thank you so much for all you've offered us, and appreciate you. Thank you.
Well, and I appreciate you, and I really appreciate this opportunity to help people really not be afraid to go there and to understand that it's not just like something they should do, but something that holds such tremendous promise if they do the work.
Absolutely. All right, we'll end there. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. I appreciate you all so much. Have a wonderful day or evening wherever you are. Namaste.